This is Michael Clara with another installment of the happenings at the Salt Lake City School District. This podcast is titled State Superintendent Dickson Protects Gwendolyn Johnson. And Gwendolyn Johnson is the Associate Superintendent. And the question is, why is Superintendent Dickson, who's at the Utah State Board of Education, is protecting the Salt Lake City School District's Associate Superintendent? Before I answer that question, let me take care of a couple of, foundational issues. One is that I'm being told, and I kind of find some evidence of that when a superintendent goes into a new school district, at times they do bring in other people. And this is an example of that. In a 2014 article, I found that former Austin Independent School District superintendent takes 5 employees with her to Atlanta. One of them, in this case in 2014, happened to be Dr. Gadsden, who's now here in Salt Lake City. And that's what the issue ends up being, that when he came to Salt Lake City last July of 2021, there was an issue with the people that he brought in, and that's one of them is Gwendolyn Johnson. And the other foundational point I want to bring up is back in the day when I was on the school board, this is an example of a human resources of a contract that administrators would sign, and if we're not using this today, this format or this template, we should, because and if we are using it, then we need to really follow it. I'm talking about the human resource department here in Salt Lake City, because what happens is an administrator that gets hired, they say right here, preconditions, that before this contract is effective, the employee shall furnish the following documents which must be accepted to the Human Resource Department. And it goes through right here. And one of the ones that we should be looking at official transcripts and any documentation. And then the person says here, they're agreeing. I understand and agree that it is an express precondition to the formation of this contract that all the items of information required will be supplied to the district before the effective date of this contract. I mean, it's a pretty simple checklist, but for some reason, we're not getting it here. It's not happening here in Salt Lake City School District. And then under the section of conditions, I understand and agree to the terms. And it says here that I understand and agree that any false information provided in my job application, resume, or any other related documents is grounds for immediate termination whenever the district learns that the information is false, regardless of the time learned. So this is something that we should be, again, doing and emphasizing to people. And one of the other points of this contract, at the very top, it says, you have been approved for recommendation to the Board of Education for employment to a position in Salt Lake City School District as indicated below. So the person understands that they do the preconditions, the conditions of the contract, they sign it, but they will have to be approved by the board. So, and I'll explain a little more about that later on. But what I want to talk about is we did a records request a couple months ago because of some of the questions that were swirling around, and did a records request on the 3 candidates for associate superintendent. And what we learned is there were 3 candidates, and the one that was hired was Gwendolyn Johnson White. And here's a copy of the application that she turned in to the district and that was considered. And then, she has a number of questions that she's required to answer. And one of the issues on this, she gives her work history, if you will. And so really, there's only 3 parts to her work history that she disclosed on this application. And it's from 1978 to 1990. And then the next part of it is 1990 to 2001. And you see here that she's it says assistant principal. And then the next part of her application that she puts in there for work history is 2001 to 2011, and then she says she's retired. And according to this application, she was retired. She's been in retirement since 2011. And we actually hired her as the assistant superintendent or associate superintendent, I should say, here in the Salt Lake City School District, and which is bizarre when you look at the applications of the other two. And it's like, it doesn't make sense when you look at it. Why was she hired over the other two candidates? One of the other interesting points that I'll come back to is the application in the Salt Lake City School District says, have you surrendered your teaching certificate, credential, license, permit, or had one denied, revoked, or suspended, or is any investigation or adverse action now pending against you? She says no. And then the next question, have you been placed on disciplinary probation or been suspended for any position? No. All right. So you'll see why that's significant. And then here, she agreed that when she applied here in Salt Lake City School District, that a background check could be conducted. And once this application was turned in, we see here that Lauren from the Human Resource Department here in Salt Lake City on July 1st, 2021, put a note on this application that she meets the minimum qualifications for associate superintendent position. And so, which is normal, that you would expect that people in the Human Resource Department would make sure that an applicant who's applying for a position meets the minimum qualifications for consideration. But later on, it looks like on July 1st, same day that she said that she met the qualifications, at 5:50 p.m., she sends an email to Gwendolyn and says, we're missing, and I'm dropping down from the numbers, we are missing pieces of information from you. More specifically, this may be your leadership license information, specific years spent in principal roles compared to years spent in district level positions or district level supervised departments to fully determine your eligibility for the associate superintendent role. Please update your application or respond to this email by 11 a.m. on Tuesday, July 6th. Gwendolyn Johnson replies to her on Friday, July 2nd, and says, here are the principal roles, the roles that she's been the principal. And and we can overlay it with her application. And so as I pointed out, the application for her work history has 3 sections. They're all in the same district. And in the third section that goes from year 2001 to 2011, this is where she's saying that she worked as the principal. Then Lauren writes back to her and says, thank you for the quick response. In your resume, so not on the application, but in the resume, she says, you listed being a North and West area administrator. Could you provide me the years spent in these roles and any supervision department name as teaching and learning, because this was one of the requirements. You had to work in, I think, one of these categories or all of them. Let's see, I think just one of them, supervised department names. So anyways, there's really no place when you look at her application prior to this, she's in teaching roles. And by the way, this email, according to the records response, because we received these in response to records requests, there's no email response to this from Gwendolyn. And there's really no answer to it. She doesn't have, according to her, the application that she submitted, she doesn't actually had or didn't demonstrate that she had any district supervisory experience, because, and she says right here, these are principalship roles, and then she retires. So the next, so this email doesn't get answered. It's a valid question. And then on July 8th, Moselle, who was at the time, I guess, the HR person for the district, she's going to give these 3 applications over to a committee. And in the district, they had formed a committee, and here they are, the principal from Clayton Middle School, another principal, April Reynolds, Assistant Director of Facilities, Ricky Martinez, and then Michelle Amiot, who's in the District Director of Assessment and Evaluation, and Alan Kearsley, who's a business administrator. So we would think that, and I don't know, I have no idea what the structure was or how things went, but I would looking at this committee, I would have a lot of confidence in their ability to judge between three people who is the most qualified. So I also know that when you're on these types of hiring committees in the Salt Lake School District, you sign a non-disclosure. So, I guess they're not going to be able to tell us how, what the process is. I'm hoping that at one point they can at least talk about the process, because as you'll see here, the process is broken. And so I'm not clear on what their roles are or how we ended up with the decision that was made. One of the interesting things is that when Dr. Gatson applied for the job here in Salt Lake City, Gwendolyn Johnson is one of his references on his on his resume. Then moving along from a timeline, and just to give you a reference here, this was like back on July 8th that this committee was convening to look at the three applicants. And then we jump into August of 2021, and Moselle and the communications director here in Salt Lake City School District are making a bio for Gwendolyn Johnson. And one of the things here that's just incredible. I mean, like, I fell off my chair reading this, and this part down here where it says that that at Independence Middle School and Gold Coast Community High School during her tenure, she achieved academic excellence for IMS, which is the Independence Middle School, by providing leadership for the school to earn and maintain a grade of A and increase performance indicators for all student groups. She received a letter of recognition from the State Department of Education for her leadership and academic achievement. All right. So anyways, I'm going to hold you in suspense and tell you why that's just incredible. And by the way, here on Moselle's email, she is, I didn't remember, but she was the human resource person, I guess, for a couple of years before that. I forget how long she was in the district. But so on August 16th, she and the communications director for the district are making this bio. And then on August 17th, Dr. Gatson announces that Gwendolyn Johnson White is the new associate superintendent here in Salt Lake City School District. So one of the things that happened is when I heard her name, I just punched in her name and Googled it and found, she says her name is Gwendolyn Johnson. Why I found Gwendolyn Johnson and started reading things, and I knew that she was from Florida, but I did a little more research and connected it and said, yeah, that's her. So what happened was that here's an article from July 28, 2008. It says that an audit and investigative file contained on August 26 email from Independence Administrative Office that instructed teachers to give the non-existent students fabricated grades and conduct marks on the school's computer. And the article says that a school district investigations committee recommending firing Johnson after finding that the career educator inflated enrollment figures and awarded fake grades to student records. And then it says here that they transferred her to the charter school after the district audit found 24 students were improperly counted at the Independence Middle School and given C grades and behavior marks. And then another article, so that was 2008, and then in 2011, the title on the news was "Former Palm Beach County Principal Punished." State board has issued sanctions against retired Palm Beach County School Principal Gwendolyn Johnson in a case that first surfaced in 2008. And then Johnson, who led the Gold Coast Community School in West Palm Beach until July, faced allegations of inflating enrollment figures and awarding fake grades to students at Independent Middle School in Jupiter, where she was principal in the fall of 2007. And then you have here that they a state board hearing issued sanctions against her, and then it kind of goes over her history again. So basically, what's concerning about that? Remember this bio that these two wrote? It's like Independence Middle School, that she achieved academic excellence for IMS by providing leadership for the school to earn and maintain a grade of A and increase performance indicators for all groups. Yeah, I guess she did that. And that she received a letter of recognition. Well, the letter was, I think I have a copy of it here later, I'll show you. But I don't think it's a kind of recognition that somebody would want to brag about. But this is the obfuscation that goes on here in the Salt Lake City School District, where when you read this, you say, well, they're not lying. I mean, that's true. She did that. She achieved academic excellence, and they earned a higher grade, and she did get recognition from the State Department of Education. But like this kind of stuff would just drive me nuts when I was on the school board. And in fact, I had a motto that said about the administrators that they lied so often, I was surprised whenever they told the truth. And this would be an example of the kind of lies that just naturally can be put out there without even giving it a second thought. So after making the announcement and putting her bio out there, the October, a couple months later, then the board now is going to take action on officially hiring Gwendolyn Johnson White. And you see here it comes out on the HR report for the board every business meeting. This is usually on the consent agenda, where the board exercises their authority to approve the hiring of every employee that comes into the district. And Gwendolyn Johnson Wright, here's her place in the org chart of the school district as the associate superintendent. And this is just a blow up of where she's at. And then, this is her, where she fits into the organization chart. So one of the things I did is you can go to this web page here, and you can look up any educator's license. So I looked up her license, and I was a bit surprised to find that she's not issued a license until April 15th, 2022. And remember, when I was showing you this contract, a template of one or copy of one that was used when I was on the board, it says that that you have to have a valid administrator license for Utah appropriate these assignments. So the thing is, this is a precondition. And so here's one of the things that needs to be fixed in the Salt Lake City School District. Unless there's something I don't know about, it seems like you would want people, especially from out of state, to show you that they have a license. I'm not understanding the part about hiring somebody and then, 6-7 months later, they can get their license. According to this thing, this contract here, precondition is to get it before, not after. And then there's board policy. I'm not going to go through and read them, but there's board policies on what people in the HR department should be doing. And then here's a board policy that mirrors the state rule, which is a law that says that you're required conduct as an educator shall, which is, if you understand the law or a policy, when a policy here in the state of Utah passed by a board of education has the force of law. And it says that an educator shall provide truthful, accurate, and complete information in licensing, transfer, and employment and applications or other documentation. And we already know from Gwendolyn's application, she wasn't truthful because she said that she never was on probation, and that's not what those articles said. And then I was able to confirm that through a records request in Florida. But at any rate, here's the policy. And again, I believe a lot of that could be prevented, the problems that we're having today with personnel, if the Human Resource Department would have did their job in the first place here in Salt Lake City. So one of the things that I did was I submitted a records request to the state to the Utah State Board of Education. And what I'm asking them for is just a copy of Gwendolyn. I did a records request the week before for another for Mackey, I believe it was, and I did the same, and I got the records that I needed. I did the same request here, and what I found out was when I sent in the request, Ben Rasmussen, because I did a different records request and received this email. I do my records request, I believe, on May 5th, and Ben Rasmussen sends an email to Logan and says, we received a request from Michael Clara regarding Gwendolyn White, who I understand is an administrator in your district. I'm not sure if he's just fishing or what he's looking for. So here in the state of Utah, when you do a records request, the government entity that you're asking, it's none of their business what you're doing. They don't have to know what you're doing, and you don't owe them an explanation. But for whatever reason, this bureaucrat who's really just worthless, in my opinion, as a public servant here in the state of Utah, he sends an email to the HR director at Salt Lake School District telling him that I'm doing a records request for some, for the application of somebody and it's a state record that I'm looking for. But he has to tell Logan Hall at the Salt Lake City School District. So here is his response to me. He gives me some of the records, and he gives me, like, Gwendolyn, she has a current certificate from the State Department of Florida, even though, as we know, she retired in 2011. She was able to get this certificate from 2017 to 2022. And another one he gave me is one from Georgia, which is a bit bizarre because she has no work history in Georgia, and this is expired anyway. So I'm not sure what the relevance of it was. And I figured, well, I'll look at her application that she filled out and turned into the state. Well, what happens is Ben Rasmussen doesn't give me a copy of her application. So under the records request, the grandma law, I file an appeal to the state superintendent, and she responds when I file the appeal and say, hey, I'm just looking for one document, application for Utah Educator license of Gwendolyn Johnson White. She says, thank you, Mr. Clara. I don't see a request for an application for Utah Educator license. And therefore, it appears your request is not withheld. You would need to submit a grammar request for that specific document. So hear what she said. Submit a grammar request for that specific document. So I wasn't going to. I said no, because I made the request because you gave me these documents the week before for somebody else. So I was going out of town, so I sent a text to a friend of mine and said, hey, can you, and she understands grammar. I said, can you send a records request for Gwendolyn Johnson White? And all I want is her application for Utah Educator license. And when she sends it in, Rasmussen tells her, you need to go through the board, through the open records, that there's this webpage she needs to go through, basically saying he's not going to accept the records request. So then my friend just does an appeal to the state superintendent and says, okay, that's like a denial. You're not going to give me the record. I did everything I was needing to do to request it. And she explains that to here you got to appeal to the state superintendent. And the state superintendent says, no, I'm not giving it to you. And I remember the state superintendent just told me on the email I needed to ask specifically for it. Well, here I got somebody to do it. And she says, you got to go to this other webpage. So I just said, that's fine. So I file an appeal with the state records committee. And now we're scheduled to have an appeal hearing on September 15th, 2022. And what will happen, I can predict, what's going to happen is I'll show the state records committee that the week before, when I did a records request to the state, that I asked for this, and then it was the state superintendent who said application, license from other jurisdictions, transcripts, practice, score reports, and previous educator experience are in the file. And they gave me a copy of Kimberly Mackey's application for Utah Educator license, but this is what the what they're not disclosing now for some reason for Gwendolyn Johnson White. And then, I'm going to show the State Records Committee that when I did the records request, that Ben acknowledges that he knows what I'm looking for. And he has enough strength and energy to send an email to Logan Hall at the Salt Lake City School District to send an email alerting him to what I'm looking for, which he should have did that just to send me the application. But instead, this is where this guy puts his energy in. And I'm not going to go into the details, but here's the law. My friend, I followed the law when I did it. My friend who did the new request because the state superintendent said specifically asked for it, she did. A person making a request that you submit it. It doesn't say you got to go through a web page or anything like that. And then, in fact, on the state web page for the records, the State Records Department or State Records Committee web page, it gives you a list of all the state agencies and who their records officer is and who their email is. And Ben Rasmussen is it, and there's his email if you want to do a records request. And on the state page, they even have a form you can fill out and turn in. So and it says even here, this is on the Records Committee state webpage, the following forms have been prepared for use in records request process. While use of these forms is not mandatory, and neither is using a particular web page. So at any rate, back in 2018, I went same thing, go to the Records Committee about an issue that the state board, and this is Rasmussen and the state superintendent, were denying that they had any records of what I was asking for. And here I was looking for a copy of the school resource officer and school administrative training curriculum, as well as the records relating to purchasing of training curriculum from vendors or consultants, additional copies of documentation demonstrating an alleged conflict of interest that Dr. Prospero has in the development of that curriculum. And these guys, initially when I was doing the records request and the appeal to the state superintendent, said they didn't have any of these. And then when we get to the Records Committee, the Records Committee ordered them to give me the documents, and they gave me over 200 documents. So this is the kind of dishonesty, that we're dealing with at the highest levels of education here in the state of Utah. In contrast, when I do a records request to the Florida Department of Education on Gwendolyn Johnson's White information, they send it to me. They send me the Educator, the Education Practices Commission, and their hearing and what the charges were against her. And then they send me a copy of the letter, which is, I'm assuming that this is the letter of recognition that the people in Salt Lake City School District Communications Director, they're calling this a letter of recognition and putting this in the bio of our new associate superintendent, which is just bizarre. So it's clever, to call it a letter of recognition, but I don't think it's a letter of recognition that a lot of educators want to have. And, here on this subject, Dr. Eric J. Smith versus Gwendolyn Johnson. That I don't know. I'm not an educator, but that would run chills down my spine if this is the kind of recognition I was getting. But in the Salt Lake School District, I guess that's something to be celebrated, and they stick it in your bio. And then this is just the final order of what the consequences were and how she was placed on probation. So at any rate, that's what the purpose of this podcast was about, is why is the state superintendent, not releasing the application for Gwendolyn Johnson White. I'm going to just predict here that there's a lot of problems with her application. This is one I got last week on Kimberly Mackey. I did the same request and got it, but then there were a lot of issues with Kimberly Mackey's application. But I think for Gwendolyn, when we get it, and when we get her application, we're going to find that when it says here, has my educator license in another jurisdiction been under investigation, surrendered, suspended, revoked, or made invalid for any reason, she probably marked no. And now Rasmussen and the state superintendent realize that, that she's in violation of state law now, but they're going to try to conceal, be sneaky and underhanded and self-serving and not release the document, which eventually they're going to have to. So in closing, let me just say what's next. There's a lot of things what's next at the Salt Lake City School District, but if you're interested in it, you can go back on my YouTube page, the Michael Clara channel YouTube page, and watch the video I made on Kimberly Mackey, who is still at the Salt Lake School District as far as I'm aware today. And today is like May 26th. Back on May 5th, I filed you can watch the video on it. I filed ethics, I made an allegation of ethics violation with the state of Utah against Kimberly Mackey because she's saying that she has a doctorate and she doesn't. And you can watch the video on that. And that was another thing that that Rasmussen and the state superintendent are colluding with and covering up. It's just bizarre. They're just, I don't know. I don't know what their misleading and deflection and all that deceiving is about on the state level. So what's ahead? We have another employee that was recently hired, Leeson Taylor. He's was a superintendent that was fired in a previous job, but somehow he qualifies, to work here in our school district. And then there's this whole big thing about Travelgate at Grand Canyon University. And I don't know if it's something I'm going to get into, but keep your ear to the ground about what's going on there. And basically you have here that Dr. Gatson worked at Grand Canyon University, and there was like a bunch of travel, and that the university paid for people here in the Salt Lake School District to go over there and do all kinds of stuff. And then, you have Dr. Gatson, who used to work there. And then according to this thing that the communications director and the HR director put out, we have Dr. Johnson White is an adjunct professor in the doctoral and graduate program at Grand Canyon University. So, there's more to follow on that. All right, so the last section for this is action needed. One of the things I would recommend that people do, especially if you were involved in this hiring process, it's really a sham. Right now, the Utah State Legislature has the Legislative Auditor General's office is doing an audit of the Salt Lake City School District. And apparently 2 or 3 years ago, there was a new law passed that they were going to randomly pick districts and do audits on. They did one on Weber School District. And here's, you can look up on the webpage. And then they have audits in progress. And you see right here, they have the Salt Lake City School District that they're doing. Here's their phone number. I would recommend you call them and talk to them about the process that was rigged on how this hiring process went, because I can't imagine that it was legitimate for a number of reasons. And I'm hoping that in the audit that's going on now, that they'll review the broken process of hiring that's going on here in the Salt Lake City School District. And the last thing I want to say is to the Board of Education, ultimately, it's your responsibility, to have competent people in the Human Resources Department and to have people that are going to follow the process and the policies that you've set forth. And I'm not on the board anymore, but when I was on the board, I would Google people that were from out of state. And a couple of times I did find things that so I'm just saying these things that I found about, I'm a citizen, I don't have any access to anything that no one else has. Pay attention to who's coming into the school district and exercise your authority. I have a book here. It's called, in my library, Early Schools and School Books of New England. And it says that, and I forget the year now, I think I have it on here, in 1645, that among the first school boards that was organized in 1645 in Dorchester, Massachusetts, that citizens there decided to pick 3 able and efficient men to be wardens or overseers of the grammar school. And their responsibility was to, the major ones that pertain to this podcast, find an able-bodied schoolmaster, and then number 4, ensure that schoolmaster faithfully performs his duty. And so all the chaos and the mismanagement that's occurring in the school district right now, that's the responsibility of the school board to fix. And that's why, I put up here, that caption that's on the contract, at least when I was on the school board, that says you've been approved and recommended for recommendation to the board. Just like the very first school board that was established, one of the first established in this country, even before this country was established, the school board still has a responsibility to be the guardians of public education and ensure that people that are coming into the schoolhouse are qualified and competent. And I'm just, in a nice way, just asking the current board, please exercise your authority and clean out the schoolhouse and get things in order. Thank you.